excited to be here. We are all from Carbon 5. Can you hear me okay? A little louder?
No, the volume's way back there.
I will speak.
You might be able to hear. You might be able to turn the gain. Nope.
Cool. So this is going to be kind of like an informal chat. You could say it's like podcast style. So we've got like a rough structure of what we're going to talk about, but otherwise it's going to be kind of feeling it out. The jazz trio. So anyways, we're going to get started here in a second. I'm Ben Jakes. I'm the product designer at Carbon 5. We have Wil Wade, principal software developer. Allie O'Connell, director of products at Carbon 5. And yeah, let's get started. Allie, do you want to talk a little bit about Carbon 5?
Yeah, I'm curious, how many of you guys are already familiar with Carbon 5? People are? Okay. So we are a software development consultancy. We've been around since 2000. We have offices in 4 cities. We're in San Francisco, where we started, LA, New York, and Chattanooga. So we're kind of the outlier, but we're very proud to be here. We're a company, we're under 100 people, so about 85, and the majority of everyone works at the company is a software developer, a product designer, or a product manager. And the way we work is we consult with companies big and small, from funded startups all the way through Fortune 500 companies that are doing digital transformation or retooling products or adding incubators. So it really runs the gamut. And the way we work is we have dedicated people on teams, designer, developers, and product manager, all working together, focusing on the problem, working collaboratively with our clients, often pairing with clients, developers, designers, and product folks, business folks to deliver software.
Let's start off with a quick cross-functional. What is a cross-functional team? This is the really loose definition, and that is that it means we're putting product, business, and mics on the ground. We're putting all product, business, design, and developers on a team together, focused on one or more products. So instead of having people siloed in different departments and you request department resources and stuff, it's more focused around one or more products. Now, so how many people right now would say that you are on or have been on a cross-functional team? Okay. All the people have heard about Carbon 5. No, it's not the same set, but it's about the same number. So let's dig right into it. And I know, like, Allie, this is one of your big, like, when you're talking about Carbon 5, one of your big selling points about cross-functional teams is about the efficiencies that it brings. So why don't we start there? Like, tell me a little bit about how cross-functional teams, from the business standpoint, makes that efficiency.
Definitely. So from the business perspective, and generally when he says selling this, it's because we're already on a project, working with the team, working with a company that's worked in a more hierarchical structure, where there's lots of reporting up, there's lots of pre-planning, and generally more waterfall or slightly agile development. So when we're trying to sell it to the team, we all agree we're going to try this different style of work, going to work together, and what allows us to do is reduce planning time to weeks instead of sometimes months before we plan out a product. It allows us to delay decision making, so we can be more agile and respond to what we're learning from users or the market or the needs of the business as they change. So it allows us to work a lot faster, and also just we can ask for more devolved decision making to the people that are working on the product. So instead of having to run it up the chain every time we want to change direction, there can be points where we check in and people know where we're headed, which should be the cost of transparency. But by having the team be empowered to make decisions, we're able to move a lot faster and take our learnings and put them into practice without too much slack in the system.
Just to kind of define your terms, can you explain briefly like agile versus waterfall? That might be kind of common to everyone, but you're just kind of clear on that.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks, Ben. I have a bad habit of getting jargony, so thanks guys for calling me out. So yeah. Agile versus waterfall. Waterfall, I mean, a lot of projects make sense to do in a waterfall fashion. Like if you're going to build a building or run a nuclear power plant, or there's many things you follow step 1, 2, 3, 4 until the thing is built. And with software, we like to kind of sculpt it as we're learning. So we start with an MVP, we test it, we might even start with a paper prototype or something before that. It's very aligned with lean principles, like lean startup principles. So being agile allows us to basically delay decision making and work in small increments, kind of like an iterative process instead of step 1 to step 50.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, like the the projects, the times where we strayed from our process and was like, oh, we'll let this kind of follow more of a waterfall process. It does come back to bite us, like it really does. Everyone's roles become sort of out of sync. We have less cross-functional collaboration, and you end up in this odd scenarios where you design everything to be beautiful, then you hand it off, and it's not built the way you imagined it. And then there's not really that.
Reduce risk, right?
Yeah,
So we want to make sure that what we're building is the right thing for our market and to serve our goals. So if we wait until we show it to customers, or we wait to show something to a client, for example, then we're losing out on all this learning we have. We'll like go off in the wrong direction for a long distance before having to course correct.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the SpaceX thing. That was a good example.
I don't remember what
you were
SpaceX
talking
you were talking about.
rock, how they were like even in
Oh,
rocket
yes,
science.
yes. So even like I remember you think like right buildings are one of those things you can't really change too much about the structure, the underlying structure. But like SpaceX with the Falcon rocket went through six to nine, I forget the exact number, iterations where they build a rocket, they're launching satellites. It's the thing we can't really make mistakes, but then they're actually still refining and iterating several times over. It kind of stopped now. But I think like one of the keys, like as an engineering person, I think very pragmatically. I think one of the things that cross-functional teams allow you to do, and we try to do this whether we're kind of working in that cross-functional environment or not, but it allows you to be very pragmatic. And that pragmatism is kind of, I think, one of those core tenets of a cross-functional team, where it's that level of we know what we know, but we also know we don't know everything. And so it's okay if the design is maybe missing what the animation is supposed to be in this one little spot. It allows us to walk over to design or Slack them. It's not that you're 5 years removed now on another project. You're still working with us, and you get that collaboration aspect that when it's siloed, you just don't have the ease of it. Ends up being a lot. It's not efficient, right? To walk over design, get you off of a different project for 5 minutes to answer the question of should this animation bounce or not. Little tiny questions that get missed. And there's that pragmatic understanding that even if you were to write everything out in a waterfall manner, right? You don't get everything.
You're always going to miss something.
You always, yeah. And then that creates a weird dynamic team where it's like you're setting yourself up for failure because you haven't caught everything, you haven't predicted everything. There's only you have to work on it. You have to create it and iterate before you really know.
It creates a lot of trust on the team that way too. Like we start off like none of us are going to think of everything. There's going to be things that come up that we're going to need to address, and also it kind of gives the whole team responsibility if you're looking at the product as a whole. It's not like devs have blinders on, they're just worried about how to deliver it, or design just worried about what it looks like. I mean, we're all kind of working together thinking about how a user is going to move through the whole experience, and we'll have developers in IPM like point something out, like hey, like if this, then it's going to be different from the other experience that we have. And it's great to have that many checks in place. We're all kind of worried about the success of the product, not just our little piece.
Yeah, I'm thinking too of a project I was on, one of my first Carbon 5 projects actually. And that was one where it was with a startup, funded startup in New York. They had a business, they were actually doing real stuff. They're kind of half gig economy, yes. They tried to actually hire their people instead of putting them in 1099 and having them actual contractors, but actually hiring them and stuff. They're trying to do all these good things and stuff. And they decided halfway through the engagement that they were going to completely change how their business model worked, how they understood their business structurally. So they'd be basically still doing the same things, but all of the requests and everything that they had that their employees, in this case, were doing was going to entirely invert, mapping, the whole thing was just flipping on its head. And it was definitely hard because there was a ton of code already there. But it was that kind of thing of if they just asked us to build, it would have been another many months before we finished building the thing. And they're like, oh yeah, 3 months ago we decided to change our entire business model. This no longer works at all. And so in that case, we were able to actually, stay remote for 3 months or whatever it would take to build the original thing they wanted, but also then recover, pieces and parts of what had been built before.
Yeah, I have a background about 10 years of working more in like the traditional design world, and Jordan knows that process I went through, kind of getting into product design, and it's been like a pretty radical shift, because prior to Carbon 5, I was working hard to create the most beautiful design or 3 series of options to present to the client, and fingers crossed, we did our research and we got it. And then if you get it, then you hope it works out in the real world. You hope it's going to get built correctly. And that was like a really stressful. I mean, we'll get into like mental health, like team health and stuff like that. But it is like a really stressful way to go about work because you're just guessing so much. It's also very high ego, high or low. Like the opposite of ego, can be high ego, but the sort of agile process is very low ego, you have to be low ego. It's all about these continual conversations and the always work on that for the product. You're catching things quickly, and this is the smallest little conversations on Slack.
I wonder if you would help talk about what that process sort of looks like.
I want to jump in real quick though and ask a question, because you and I think we've also been doing this up here on the stage, because in our mind they're linked, and I wonder, Allie, do you think can you be cross-functional and not be agile? Is that a possible thing? You can be agile, or can you be agile and not are those two things?
I think it's hard to be agile if you're not cross-functional, because the idea is to solve problems in small iterative chunks. So, I think you do a better job if you're coming at it from all angles. Like, what's the business perspective? What is the user going to do? What are technological limitations? We have to solve problems within that sphere. So it works well for agile. I think for waterfall, think about architects and things. They have to work with contractors and figure out how to solve problems. But I guess when I'm thinking about agile, it's a minimum viable product. We're a startup. We're just going to get every talk. Let's talk about minimum viable product and being startup. But can you solve the problem? You can't. When you build a building, you don't start with a tent. But when you build software, there's that visual of the skateboard and then the scooter and then a bicycle and then a car. All of them are transportation devices. So I think that there's ways to be cross-functional in waterfall organizations, just different to a different ends. I think. In software, I think you kind of have to be cross-functional for agile to work well. Right. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you ever able? I guess when you were working in the more agency model, were you ever able to be did you ever work with product and developers at all? That's a no then, obviously.
If you tried to do that, I felt like I was being a really good employee if I went to developers or something like that. So yeah, I think that it's not often paired together. It tends to be more maybe talk to the client or project manager or something, get the little bit of feedback on what colors, stuff like that. Just know sort of the ground rules, and then just do your stuff and hope it works out well, and hope you have a talented team to make it happen. But yeah, that's why we're here today.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think for me, in projects where we ended up a little more waterfall, because engineering tends to be the last piece of the puzzle, we're the ones actually, in theory, pushing the ship this code to the website, or some form of engineering is, doing, after some approval, but they're the ones actually getting it to people in the end. We end up, I think, almost always, this is where a cross-functional team is really more efficient, right? Because we end up always going back to design, going back to business, or hopefully, if we don't, maybe there's a problem there. And in the end, business looks at the website that we just turned on, and they're like, it's not what we wanted, or that's great. Yeah, we needed it 5 months ago, or whatever the case there may be.
What tenant is production, the thing that we build is always a source of truth. So when we're pushing things up to an acceptance environment, we're asking the product owner to take a look at it, make sure it's the right thing at the story level. So like everyone's seeing exactly what we're building as we're going. And then as we get to the when we get to production, yeah, whatever exists in the wild is the source of truth, not the plan, not the backlog. Those things can change.
And just to be clear, acceptance is sort of the space, probably define better than me, but it's space where it's sort of live, but it's not public. And then
In production.
Yeah.
It's like the real, where you have users logging in.
Exactly. And of course, we're talking in terms of like software. So hopefully some of these ideas translate to non-software.
I'm curious, how many folks in here are software folks? Are working with it? Okay.
Who is not in software?
Oh,
What are some of you that know that?
Service industry, we're on a landscape company.
Landscape,
Cool. Okay.
I have a yoga studio.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool.
Very curious.
I think a lot of the cross-functional concepts, like even if you're not cross-functional, we're talking a lot about cross-functional between like product and engineering and design, but I think that kind of concept of having not just the stakeholders in the room, not just the people who are making the decisions, but the people who are executing the decisions. Like that's kind of, I think if we go down like maybe a level deeper, higher, we'll work on that part later, but whichever direction you want to go. Like cross-functional team says it's not just the people who get to make the decisions that are in the room figuring things out, but it's actually the people who are implementing those decisions. Because the people implementing have different understandings than the people who are making decisions. And it's not that either one's wrong. But it's that they're coming from they have different viewpoints and understandings, and that together they make a better product. Whether that product be a yoga studio or landscaping, I'm sure like in landscaping, that's probably an easier. I know more about landscaping than I do about yoga. But right, with you have landscape designers, and if those designers aren't actually talking to the people building it, there's probably some trouble. I can imagine that you have a lot of the same troubles that we have, where if design and engineering aren't talking, that design can come up with something that's completely doable, but takes a whole lot more time than a slight modification where engineering is like, oh yeah, that comes out of the box, but can you like this one button here? I don't know, I'm making something up, but like if you can make this one change, or if this doesn't do this one thing, is that okay? And you're like, oh yeah, of course. And
it's amazing that like little communication back and forth, whether it's person in Slack or when we're estimating a story or in stand-up. We're able to resolve this so quickly. And like I said, it's also like a low ego kind of thing. Like if you're able, like oftentimes I put up my design, we're estimating it with the product team. Design has like arrived on these solutions, these features, and we say, okay, here's the design. And my old self would like to be like, it's done, it's perfect. Say no more. How dare you criticize it? I already got the client's approval. Everything's good. But so often, developers chime in like, hey, do you think about this edge case? Think about what's going to happen when you click to this toggle and that download button doesn't apply to this chart you need to download. And it's amazing. And all of a sudden, it's like a richer, more meaningful story. And we talk about stories as that's sort of like our way of breaking down work and projects. But it's just that much better. And so I've personally really enjoyed working with developers because you guys maybe aren't designers and maybe with whatever different varying aesthetic eyes, whatever, it doesn't really matter.
You're saying we don't know how to design something.
Often I notice that product and design can often tend to think sort of on the happy path, and you guys are just really
we are business.
But it's great.
It's being broken all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're looking out
It's
for
really
that.
more of a mystery than the computers work.
Yeah. And so when you combine those two viewpoints together, it's like just that much stronger. We're able to catch stuff like before it gets in front of the user. And
It really is a combined effort, and it's like I think that's the type of the low ego part. Like we all have the same goals, and I think from like a product management perspective, the way we like chop up goals, so we're all kind of very clear on what we're driving towards, and we're setting up problems to solve. So like when we write pieces of work, it's like, okay, this is a problem that we have to solve. and it's all of our job to figure out a solution for that. So yeah, it kind of helps to make that happen.
I want to talk more about that because that's one of my, I think, my favorite parts about cross-functional teams and teams that are working well is that goal alignment. And that reduces a lot of the conflict, or can reduce a lot of the conflict because we can go back to a goal. But I know, Allie, you've done a lot of work with how do you get a team to be aligned on goals? Because a lot of times, especially, some of our clients don't always come to us aligned on goals. Engineering has their goals of being, up, 5 nines, and products about, no, I don't care if I'm up 5 nines, I want a new feature.
Yeah.
I don't care if people have some bugs or whatever the case may be. And then just alignment on like what we're actually building. And how does, you've done a lot in getting people to get aligned on goals.
Yeah, and really it runs the gamut. It's the executives all the way down, when I say down, but to like the individual contributors who's normally us. We're working on the thing. So we're trying to make sure that the company is aligned, and so there's a lot of work that can go into that if we're working with clients. But the big thing is make sure that everyone understands we're focusing on outcomes, not output. So if companies are used to saying like, oh, our velocity is down, let's do that. I really try to get people not to focus on the velocity number, except that it is helpful to us to estimate future work, how long things are going to take for this set of people. So instead of saying that what's value is this number that's really arbitrary, we say what's valuable is the outcomes. The outcomes are the goals. So the goals are around milestones or releases, but we try and make them around learning too. So you want to prioritize learning. Our goal might be we want to launch this to X user types, and we want it to I was working on a product where we were replacing a legacy product, a very old, 15-year-old, hadn't been redesigned product. So our first initiative was for our most important users. Can we create something that they can do about 95% of their job in this tool instead of the old tool? And if we succeed at that, we're going to learn a lot more, and we can figure out how to take care of the rest of our users, how we can add more kind of ancillary features to get to 100%. But if we can get this one piece done first, we'll have learned a lot, and we'll have something to learn from. So then it's all right, we're going to drive towards that. And sometimes that's a little too big, and we break it up a little more finely. So all right, first we're going to beta test these 2 features. Then we're going to add in the 3rd thing that they need, and then we'll launch it publicly. So I like to have a learning tied into the thing we're building. So we're going to reach this goal. We're doing that so that we can learn the next thing. And we don't want to, it also helps people from sort of planning too far out in the future without the learnings we could have along the way.
So I think I know the answer, but I imagine a lot of clients.
Are you baiting me?
Yes, I am. I imagine a lot of clients want everything all at once. So how do you kind of talk them down from that and help them sort of start with something?
That's probably the biggest challenge of working with people that have been very in a more waterfall project management style. Is getting them to get really involved in incremental releases, or really iterative releases. So the smallest whole, is what we call it, like the whole thing, the smallest whole piece of whatever product you make. So getting them buy-in on that is challenging. I mean, I think that we could even segue into what makes it successful. What an organization can do to make a team successful. And part of it is you have to have executive leadership bought into this idea of an empowered team. And old organizations sometimes banks that we'll work with their organization is hierarchical. There's lots of middle management, and getting them to empower the team to make decisions on weekly, monthly, whatever basis, and checking in, and you have to have good communication with your stakeholders. But that can be really challenging because they're used to the decision makers are here, and then the doers are here, and that will kill a cross-functional team. It just stalls progress. Anyway, so to think about.
Yeah.
May I ask if you could slow down just a little bit?
Oh yeah.
Taking notes fast enough.
Oh, of course. Sorry.
You
I'm gonna
definitely
blame the
can slow down some.
coffee. Sorry about that.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of building that environment for the team and setting a team up for a healthy team that's able to collaborate, what are some of the ingredients? Well, you want to take that and then
What are some of the ingredients? I think there is a level of understanding. You kind of touched a little bit on it. This understanding that we will always know, right now is when we always know the least amount of information we will know, because we're always going to get more information throughout the length of the project. And so I think one of the kind of the key pieces, especially from an engineering standpoint, is trying to limit our future planning, but not limit it in specifics, I guess. We want to kind of know what direction are we trying to go, and is that direction changing? But it's also that level of I don't care about the specifics right now. I don't care about the details of something 2 months from now. I don't even really care about the specifics of something 2 weeks from now.
This is important technically too. Like this is when we think about the minimum version of a feature, of course, like especially Ben and I are like, all right, like what's the functionality? I know that there are reasons to like build the minimum technical solution and not like over-engineer for a year from now.
Yeah, I think it's that there's a nice balance between a level of understanding the direction we want to go, and then understanding that direction can change. Like from an engineering standpoint, I think this may be true of a lot of design too. I'm gonna find out if that's true. Is that a lot of times there's a couple different ways to build something, and there's the way that's easy for now, and there's the way that's a little bit harder for now, but maybe easy to change to the direction you're planning on going. And then occasionally there's times where it's like, okay, we can make the super easy choice right now, but it'll make it very difficult to change in the future. And so we're going to put in a little extra time, or we're going to push off whatever bridge we don't want to cross yet, because we don't know that information. And so I don't know how much that comes across in design.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And then kind of going back to the efficiency thing, if you spend all this time predicting the future, chances are, even if you're really sharp and good at your job, chances are it's just inevitable. Things are going to change. Business goals are going to change. Organization, user goals, user input, like these are things you're going to learn. And so it's just not worth your time to make high-def design from the beginning. And I start with that. I'm like, I'm not going to just show people until it looks decent. If I show something that looks like wireframe, it's embarrassing. So that's always a struggle for me, but it definitely pays off. And I'm not, as consultants, I'm not wasting their time working on something that may just be trashed, not because I did something wrong, but I just didn't know what I knew. Like you said, you only know what you know now. And so I think that definitely applies.
How do those wireframes, from a business standpoint, right, as you're trying to build out, what kind of, again, kind of going back up to that level, kind of outside the team, if the team creates like a set of here's the wireframes, and they present wireframes outside of the cross-functional team, maybe up to an exec or something, how do you sell that wireframe to an exec?
We actually do that a lot. We do a lot of I'm trying to think some past projects where we took two products and combined them into one. It's kind of crazy. And then a lot of redesigns. There's generally a reason to help someone extrapolate from looking at a website. What are the flows through this thing? What's the architecture? The technical architecture, but the design architecture, how someone's going to. So we'll try and you can do wireframes sometimes, these little cards that look like a website, but it's so little you couldn't tell. And we'll use that as a way to communicate how we've simplified how someone will use this product, and sometimes there's different ways we can do that, and we can vet it at that stage with execs, with the sales team, with users. There's ways to get feedback on something that's more of an artifact before we start making mocks and going down one of those paths.
Right, and I think it's also about setting expectations too. If you're presenting to execs, they have to understand that these are not high def. This is not your tool. This is not the redesign. This is not the the final product. And so you can get them to understand that this is we're making decisions before we put a lot of work into it. We're making decisions on what we know now. I think that's really crucial. So I think if you have that as consultants, if we have that buy-in from the client, that trust oftentimes if they hire Carbon 5, they probably know that's like our process. And that's not what we have. Like currently Allie, our main stakeholder. Yeah. Right, yeah. She believes in what we do and understands that kind of process. So if we show her wireframe, she gets it. It's not like, where's the frame?
Oh yeah, she's been doing this like 3 times. So we have some clients,
So that's important.
the first time we work with them, they're like, what is this? It feels uncomfortable and it's very different from how they're working. And the way we deal with that is just like a lot. Since we happen internally, like whoever's sponsoring this product thing to happen, just like tons of communication. And then most of our work is actually repeat and referral because they see the value, they see the efficiency gains, they see that, I think people have bad experience sometimes on software projects. They're like, this thing took a year and then the thing I got wasn't the thing that I needed. And working in this agile way is a way to make sure that whoever we're working with gets what they need. They see it at least every week, if not every day, what we're building. There's no surprise. And once they've had that experience, we end up with lots of repeat work. So we're probably working with this client for the 3rd time over 3 years.
We have had really candid conversations with like high level people in businesses too, which is great. And that builds trust. And so it's not this like going back to the Addie story. This is like high pressure, like ad agency reveals where you're like, you know, this is the big thing. Like, hope we knocked it out of the park. We didn't. We're fired or something. And so it's just really nice. I mean, I see that's fresh for me, and I just love that about this process is that we can just have these little conversations and build trust and give their input on a regular basis. And like you said, there are no surprises. You know, like, what? We just spent all this resources, all this budget for this thing. That's not what we want.
And that.
So essentially what you're talking about is like a disembodied Scrum board, is that right? Like it's a system in which you're seeing things that are pending and done and it's assigned to different people. And when you're talking about this process, you're talking about like going back to the designer and the client. Is that an actual physical meeting or is it like a digital form that you're updating each other?
So we have a structure in place for the process, and then these things sort of hang on that. So the basic structure for this process is we have like weekly iterations, so it runs on a weekly cadence. We'll do a planning meeting on Mondays, which could be 1 to 2 hours depending, and that's where we go through and sort of look at the backlog and talk about each story as a group.
You explain the backlog.
Oh yeah, you're seeing like kind of like a Scrum board. The backlog is where all of the work is in priority order. We didn't talk about this yet, but the prioritization of that is key to make this work. So we like every piece of work has to be prioritized like that frame. So as we go through, there's been work up to that point to define and discover and maybe design that work. And then when it gets to where we're going to work on it that week or the next 2, we all look at it and talk about it together and need the developers lead that conversation often, trying to figure out like what's the level of effort for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would push back a little bit in that like the tools and the exact process I don't think matter as much as perhaps the communication and the conversation, right? The key thing I would say about cross-functional in this case is that you're constantly in communication with the rest of your team, and the rest of your team is the design, the product, the business that we say like weekly iterations, weekly meetings or something. And again, it's not about whether it's weekly or not. It's about whether you're regularly communicating. Like, here's what's going on. Here's the decisions being made. Here's the decision we need to reevaluate, which is common. And that's a lot of that reduction in conflict, right? Conflict, perhaps all conflict. No, I'm not going to go that far. But a lot of conflict is based in misunderstandings, right? And if you have those misunderstandings, it means and you can have those even if you're talking every week or every day. Misunderstandings and conflict will happen, but it makes it less likely, right? We're not about this isn't the super amazing you dash a little bit of cross-functional in your steak, taste the made that.
Cross-functional inspired.
Cross-functional.
The process you can do, I think, that help make sure those interactions happen. So we always have a planning meeting, everyone's there. We always have brunch at the end of the week, everyone's there to talk about how the week went. So I wish, everyone has a chance to voice the things as well, the things they wish were different, and we as a group come up with solutions. And then between there's like all kinds of stuff we're doing around designers and developers pairing together on a story, or doing research and definition for the next thing we're going to build.
Yeah, I think it's a really broad mix of different modes of communication, and I think some of it's going in person. So a lot of our clients are out of town, so we'll have to fly up to New York or wherever regularly to have that face-to-face time, and that's really crucial. I think it builds trust. We get a lot done in that time. We try to make sure this product design is there. Oftentimes developers will pair with. So we do a lot of this. We'll kind of like merge our team with their teams, and so we'll have our developers work with their developers. It's rare-ish that they're a big designer and our designer, but sometimes, yeah. Okay. And so, but at least design and product, getting in sync. So that I think it's a variety, sort of being very aware of like what's needed, like if there's any like friction, tension, etc. Like we should get some face-to-face time, or we should like you're good at like coming on for ad hoc calls with product owner on client side. It's just like whatever it takes to keep that communication flowing. Oftentimes with management on the client side, they don't have as much time to like pair. And when we talk about pairing, that's really essentially like, hey, Will and I are going to pair. We're going to spend, say, half an hour hashing out the problem together. Will maybe ran something that like the design didn't really cover, like an edge case or something. Like, then is this a appropriate, extrapolation of your design? And so we just have that like sync time where we can hash it out together and actually solve the problem live in person or at least over Slack or video call.
Which really saves time and makes it more efficient too. Like you don't have to go and like make a new perfect wireframe. You just hop on the call for 30 minutes to problem solve and implement it.
Yeah. Should I kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
So I'm the US designer at Bigot. We're also opening our fourth office in Chattanooga. We're hiring.
What office is it?
It's Bigot, BIGBT. So we're also a software agency. Do more content sites and products and a lot of things frankly that are kind of between product functionality and also content. One of the things we face a lot is that we're redesigning something that already exists in some form. It's not starting out greenfield. You mentioned working on a legacy 15-year project. And, I'm just curious, how do you think about Agile when there's a big bucket of functionality that's kind of like launch critical, must have because it's parity with the current product.
Feature parity is like death to redesigns.
How do you deal with it? How do you
Can we define what feature parity is?
Feature parity means the new thing has to have everything the old thing had. So I can give you an example from this project where it's a Fortune 500 company, it's an acquisition from a Fortune 500 company, and they have this thing that makes money. It's an awesome product, it's a data product, like people in that industry use it. But it's super clunky. I think it's been a sales-driven organization, so like sales wants a feature because they heard from someone, they sort of cobble it on, and it sort of started to look like this big like barnacle. Like, look at the barnacle, like what's a barnacle versus what's a feature? It's just like these things that cobbled onto it. There was no way for like a user to make a path through the thing, so we really had to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, we would have a greenfield product, and we were rebuilding this whole thing from the ground up. So the thing worked. They didn't have to have it redone in like a month because it was breaking. It functioned, but it was very dated, and so it wasn't clear like which features were important. So we did a ton of user research. We did just put heap on it on the whole product, just slap heap on there and start scoring, which is an analytics platform, and trying to figure out which of these features are people actually using, and then we use that data for an argument to say, well, when we did a couple weeks of discovery, all right, I think what we should build first is this. It seems like most of our users are doing this exact thing. Let's start with that and start testing it. So it gives us, you want to convince the client to start with something that is valuable to the user that is valuable to them. So whoever is paying the most for their product, then we want to focus on that group of people, for example, and then try and solve their job. Like, can they get through the app? Can they get the value they need out of it? Okay, like then let's figure out, like Greenfield app, how might we, what is another use case and how are they using it? How is it different? How can we make it work for that main use case and build it up from there? And then like generally what we're able to do is combine some features, like people would go here, here, and here for these things. Well, really they need it in the course of this action. So we can just sort of like put these things together. Or, things that people aren't using. It's like the question is, are we willing to delay release for this? And so the stack rank can test as valuable, like add on, and then for things that the data shows people don't use, the interviews show people aren't, isn't high value, like just keep deprioritizing it, and then the question becomes, if you let the process work for you a little bit and say, all right, like we can launch here, like we've met pretty much what everyone is using. If you want to add these old things, or we also have the opportunity to use features that you didn't have in the past, which might seem more desirable to the client or to the business or whatever, or to users or the sales team. So they'll end up swapping out some of the old stuff for some new stuff. So it's just kind of.
Is that a struggle to convince the client to not do credit?
Yeah, it's always a struggle. I think the biggest issue, especially with a company that's had a product for 15 years, and sometimes less than that, or also work with a consultancy that has a similar thing, like they built a software tool, they're a consultancy in the financial market, and they had in their head how it worked, and so it was really difficult. I think the issue is the whole company already has an image in their head of what the product is and how it works, and so you kind of have to get just permission to make something small first to get people to start thinking about it in a different mental model. Like it's no longer like it doesn't look like this, doesn't act like that. It's like the kernel is a little different, like the core value is a little different. So if you can, it is always hard.
Yeah, I'd say this is where like cross-functional also helps shine. The idea of having like, and one, like there's lots of, it is definitely one of the hardest things in software is when you're replacing something that people are using. And a common way to kind of get around this is put them up side by side and slowly migrate people over as the features that people individually use. But having, again, and I'm going to swing back to like having the decision makers there along the journey with you, so that they can say, well, in both cases, so they can say, this is what I really wanted. I really needed to do this. I really want to target this area. Yes, that's going to be good enough. I'm fine with my customers I talk to all the time, working through this level. And so I think that cross-functional bit where the the stakeholders are there along the journey with you is critical.
Yeah, you're saying.
But
you're
but at the
You have to
same,
go along on the journey with you.
yeah, and yeah.
Well, I was going to say, talking back to what both you guys said, it's like users, getting that user input, like tying it back, like, hey, okay, we know you have these features and then maybe precious to you and you have these, old school legacy users that love these things, but like, let's go back to your primary audience, your primary users, people paying you the most money, and start with them and like, are they really getting the best experience? And like walk them through that, I think that really grounds the discussion. It's like, this isn't about us trying to like just tear down what you built. It's about like making your users happy, which has business value to it, right?
Yeah, and if everything comes down, like the beauty is that like the business has these goals, and a lot of it is about making money. If you can tie it to the bottom line, it's way easier to drive decisions.
I think another thing I'm hearing you say is like kind of de-emphasizing launch as this big monolithic thing, where whether it's treating launch as flexible, or it's like we'll launch when this gets to a point where
It covers
like it's featured enough,
yeah.
Or we'll put up a fully featured existing version and a kind of new beta version that will bring people over. And kind of, I guess that goes against the instincts of clients wanting to think of it as we flip a switch, we got a new product, and
We wanted to launch it earlier than that, really, but just smaller. So if they're not comfortable launching it to everybody, it's like, who can we launch this to? And maybe it's just a closed beta, maybe it's an open beta, maybe it's for one user group. But so it's not necessarily like, we don't want the risk of delaying launch, but we want to de-risk that launch. And it also makes it less scary for the company because like they launch something and it doesn't work and they're totally blindsided, but people don't like it. You kind of convince them to put something out there for some group of people to de-risk their big launch. And you can still have a big launch. There's still like the champagne moment of the old thing is being, sunset, the new thing is everything, like everyone's on the new thing. There might be like one or two features that you can go back to the old product for and try and like, yeah.
Now you always remind me of this, that like software is never done, never finished. It's a good way to wrap it up. And that's, I think, crucial. Like we can articulate it may be different for like a marketing website or something. You maybe need it to be just like final and they can kind of use it for a couple of years or a year or something. But yeah, software is never done. So we're trying to like instill practices into the client's team and help them like, pass the baton on to them and help them like carry this on because it's never done. So you'll have releases, you'll have updates. Some are bigger than others, but
yeah, and our goal is when we roll off that the client like keeps the user testing skills, the collaboration, the process, and we've paired with their team and their developers, so they know every inch of the code base. We don't do maintenance work, so it's really important that we work ourselves out of the job at the end.
You had a question, yeah.
Yeah, I know intellectually that a new set of golf clubs don't make you a better golfer. I know that. But what tools do you guys use that you're just really excited about? It's a dumb question, but I'm always curious about shark teams and what tools are using.
You want to start with what tools you use?
Sure. Well, I'm also very curious about, we definitely have technical best practices too, like continuous integration and like, are you interested in that kind of part? Like the
So I know there's project management, there's collaboration, communication tools, all the things that you manage, code repositories. There's just a million things you can just kind of go through the stack and say, you don't have to take a long time to like be like this, and this.
okay, I'll start.
You start.
Okay, I'll start.
We'll go down the line.
Okay.
Go ahead,
First we use Slack. We hate Slack and all of the Google Suite. I like we use if I have my choice of backlog tool, I like the little tracker. It's not very flashy, but it's not over featured. So it just helps us focus on the core of the work. I use just anything to externalize. So we'll do lots of like those giant sticky notes and put them on the wall and like draw and like mess things up together. And then so if you need to do that digitally, like having some tools that work for that, we use Stickies because it's free and we built it. So
Stickies.io.
Yeah, so we use that a lot for retros. And like you can do story maps in it. It's also like the features are pretty basic, but I like that because I think people get lost in the weeds of that stuff.
it's essentially like a digital tool to put stickies on a screen collaboratively, so you can like talk to people across the country and they can type
Stickies.io.
Stickies.io. So you can do retros with that. I like
it's
those
free
tools
too.
in there. I like so on the analytics side, I really like Heap because if people have not already set up that discipline in their company, it's very accessible and it's a low cost implementation. So
What is it again?
Heap is an analytics platform, like behavioral analytics. If you're gonna do like testing, I like Optimizely. There's another one that does landing pages that I'm thinking of right now.
You guys use Zoom for Google Hangouts, or what do you like?
Zoom being or Slack calls, exactly, yeah.
We end up using whatever, like as far as communication stuff goes, it often depends on the client.
Yeah.
And we definitely have preferences. Slack and Zoom tend to be our preferences, I think, across the board. But that doesn't limit, like, I want a way to chat semi-asynchronously, but with some instant messaging type ability. So like a Slack, Zoom actually has that capability as well.
Sometimes like a partner and Quill.
Yeah, that's the lawyers. The lawyers communicate.
Whatever it takes, whatever it takes.
Yeah, and from a technical side, engineering side, like a lot of it is it's a code repository. And I don't have a particular care if you're using GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab. I want some way to put code up, and I want some way for somebody to be able to comment on that code and somebody else to potentially approve that this, so we get some level of peer review, which all the major platforms now have. I think the biggest thing, like from an engineering standpoint, is the ability to push code out continuously and automatically. So it's not a big process. Even if there is maybe some, we do it every week or some kind of schedule to it, having it be as engineering deficient as possible. It needs as few engineering resources as possible, right? And so those are some of the costs that you might pay up front in an engineering project is, to set up, say, when this code happens, this is going to go out and people are going to see it, or it's going to go out to, product for acceptance. All those kind of trying to, most engineers are going to say this, I think, but trying to automate any of that kind of little stuff away so that you can spend your time, and this is, I think, one of most tools we use, is to spend your time doing your job as opposed to spend your time doing repetitive tasks that you don't really want to do. Like, there's always some of that. It's a job, right? It would be a job. It wasn't super enjoyable, but so there's a, we've used like Heroku and Circle CI and GitLab. GitLab CI is really easy to set up now as well. And GitHub has been adding new features since Microsoft brought them together. And so it's, but in a way, like, pragmatically, I don't care which tools, as long as I have those tools. And I can get even more basic on the tool list. And as an engineer, I make it happen.
What about project management? It's like what needs to be done, who's responsible, when it's accountable, timeline. Do you have there's Asana and Trello and
I like using Tracker as sort of like this is what everyone's working on, but we don't put like it's all based around engineering work there. So if you want to do some weeks time stuff like around definition or research, like I use Dropbox paper. Because normally we're doing research, and so we need to take collaborative notes a lot and like organize all the stuff somewhere. So I use Dropbox paper for that. Sometimes I'll use Trello.
I use Trello actually, because often design's path is a little bit wiggly, and it doesn't.
Things don't follow the backlog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I even share that with the client, like this is how I'm sort of interpreting the main backlog, and these are sort of design priorities and what I'm currently working on. So that increases some visibility.
But the milestones live in the backlog, and so we can choose to or not to put dates aligned with those milestones, but then the estimations and kind of our cadence of work will show us about when things will come up. And it's nice to have them there because then we have to make hard decisions of like, okay, is it worth like waiting to push out this milestone, or do we want to make it leaner and pull some stuff into the next release or next round?
I found the little tracker for an engineering side, the little trackers, I think the biggest thing I've seen in engineering is that we want something that's kind of simple and doesn't get in our way. And that can be true of even something as complex as like Jira. Atlassian's Jira is pretty big, hefty. There's a lot of stuff in there. But it's also possible to set it up such that a lot of that's hidden from the engineers and whoever's actually like day-to-day going and using it, not as a product manager, but as just I need to update stuff. And so I think the biggest key about that tool is finding one that isn't hated. And maybe that's a pretty low bar, I guess.
I like lightweight stuff because I feel like I don't want the tool to drive the process. And we adjust process. Like, part of the retro is like what's working for us, what's not. We might tweak some things. I feel like a lot of the stuff that's more around like executive communication and reporting, I put in like as a communication instead of a tool. So like we actually have like a standing time to meet with them. I can make a deck, I give them the deck, and there's like an artifact we can look back at that might have metrics or something in it. But I like to have that outside of the tool because I want it to be a little bit more like, I want people to talk back to me when we're going over this stuff.
What about CRM?
We don't build many CRMs. What do you do?
I mean, in the end, for us, like a lot of that happens before we get to the project.
Gotcha.
And in the end, like from a developer standpoint, it doesn't really matter which one, as long as it has some interface that I can code towards. And these days, fortunately, all of them do. I think something you said about like tools in general, like about the tools don't drive the process, but also that the tools become slightly less important. In a cross-functional team, the tools are slightly less important because you have that constant communication. So instead of focusing on, well, this tool is going to save us because it helps communication, it doesn't. If the communication is not there, it's not going to happen on a new tool, typically.
Totally. The same goes for like design. There's all these big debates about what's the best design tool. And it's just like, honestly, just use what you're comfortable with and what's working for the project, and eventually carve out some time to explore some other tools, and that may help you. But don't let that become a barrier to like getting the work done.
I'm a proponent of lightweight stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think that there is a reason. I think there's a moment to evolve to more complex tools. Like if you would start working with a marketing team that's doing a lot of analytic stuff too, you might decide to keep this. You want the integrations that like Amplitude has, and it's like way more expensive and more featured, and maybe even has like some customer support that's gonna like help evolve that thing. But generally, we're rebuilding something, we're building something new. So I'm even if it's for a big company and an existing audience, I'm erred towards the side of like not too much like around the edges of the tools that you're using.
Yeah.
On the product.
How are we doing on time?
Are we 15?
15 minutes, okay, any other questions?
Questions?
You guys seem to do a much better job of integrating design and development than we did. Our designer wants to waterfall the whole process and then give it to us to give it to the development team, and then we work it in. And so we can do that because we create really bland and ugly products and wait for that design to be ready that we can drop on top of it. What's your process look like that you guys work together, that you start together?
That's a great question. How do we pull in people, design? How do we pull in people into being more of a cross-functional team?
Part of it's structural. Like we have the benefit of being like oftentimes design is put in its own department, and you like have what is it like a design request, and they do the thing, and they send it back to you. You have to have support from management to put a structure in place so that person can stick with the product. And it might not make sense for it, but maybe it's two things that it has to be, but like orient them around the success of the product instead of like the tickets.
Sort of skinning things. I think that's a tendency as well, as like the designer is turning into just like a person who puts the lipstick on the wireframe or whatever analogy you want to mix. I think that can be a problem. And so one thing we try to do with this designer is like designers are generalists. Like there's so many aspects. Like this couple weeks you may be a UX designer, this week you may be the research, you may be visual designer. So it's all woven in together, and I think it also overlaps a lot with product management as well. Like we're making like product decisions alongside the client and stakeholders, so that those things that you may be built and you're waiting for design to kind of make it look pretty or on brand or something. Designer would actually be involved in like defining if that thing should be built in the first place. And so and that goes back to kind of users. Like, do users need this thing? So does that sound?
Yeah, I think some of like actually pulling in design a little bit though too is part of that process of asking for and attempting to it requires I think business has to buy into it for it to work well, but asking for lower definition designs, more maybe wireframes, and then attempting to get some level of collaboration going. And I think that's again that cross-functional concept of ease of collaboration. But even if, let's say, you're doing waterfall, right, with the design at least, you're going to come across a problem with the design. And instead of kind of just like chucking the question back over, inviting the designer, and again, this may not work in your situation, all those caveats, of course, but trying to invite the designer to work in real time with you on the problem.
Look at the same screen.
Even if that's remote, screen sharing, whatnot, but trying to increase the level of collaboration and communication, as opposed to that, and I would say getting it synchronous is critical for, you always want to have like that synchronous communication, I think, first. We always try to make sure to do in-person first, so that when you're not in person, when you're doing email back and forth or time delayed Slack message or something like that the tone and all that kind of comes across appropriately, because you've had that face-to-face time or that time where you're working on you're doing something at the same time. And so I'd say like my first step, I would say in your case, is to just invite the designer to work with you on something.
I would say first step to that.
Earlier step.
Earlier step would be like sort of that product definition, that creating that vision, like what are we trying to do, what are we wanting to build, what are we wanting to design, and really getting everyone in that conversation. And sometimes that requires, we were talking about this the other day, like sometimes it requires like creating like a vision of like what this site will look like in sort of a holistic way. And so that may seem waterfall-ish, but then you take a step back and you think like, what are the most important parts of this? And you break it out. And then you've got this core feature that you might have, this might be the first experience the user has. You design it, but then how it gets implemented is a volley back and forth between kind of a volley, just like
It's a collaboration.
and that's so it's always. I mean, of course, we do split off. You know, we do have different disciplines, but like I'm talking to developers every day, like, and that's something that is. So, Jordan.
Yeah, I guess it's a related question is, how does the process and timeline change from the beginning of the project when it's kind of unknown and you're exploring those rooms and those paths that you can take to once it's a little bit more defined? Like, do you guys allocate a lot more time? And then also how much of that vision are you showing? Is it mostly wireframes? Is it prototypes? How much client?
Something that Carbon 5 does that I've noticed, we build stuff really fast. Like oftentimes we don't build in any like product design up front. Like we generally have we can have enough of an idea of what we're building for devs to get started on like almost at the same time. Sometimes we build into it for weeks at a time if it makes sense. Like if there's if the client has a lot of random questions that they want to explore further that they haven't already done themselves, or they want the benefit of a third party that's not so like in the space to get a kind of fresh outlet. So oftentimes we're delivering software constantly. We're like sort of trying to, but at the beginning there is some work where we're like, what's the first thing we're going to build? So design and product are always a little bit out in front. Like for me, if litmus test is if the backlog has at least 2 weeks of our work that's like well defined, well designed, like we've got all the stuff in there, we're in a good spot. And then we're a little more forward. We're doing user interviews, we're doing user tasks, we're like kind of probing a little bit more and designing the thing like 2 weeks in front.
And I think, we do try to, we maybe are exploring, but we try to get the developers something to build that as quickly as possible. And so that's a big priority. I mean, some of it's, I think, the fact that we're consultants, and so we do have like limited budgets and things like that, so we want to be sensitive to their time. Maybe that's a struggle internally in a company, but I think that works for everything.
And sometimes we get to a point where we've done the exploration, we figure like I think actually I've done some 2-week periods before projects started recently. I feel like we're doing them a little more often than we used to. But so we'll do some like research and early design and sort of like ideating with the clients very high touch. And we have at least a developer we can reach out to vet ideas to make sure we're not like designers on the corners in some way. And we're like vetting those ideas. But then we sort of like build, measure, learn, and we might get to a point where we've hit a big milestone and like, okay, now we need to target a completely different user. So we're always trying to like balance tightening up the thing we're building for a specific use case right now and knowing that, all right, this next priority is coming with the company. How do we build some time in for ourselves to like do some of that early ideation again for a different part of the product? So does that answer your question a little bit? Yeah, it's hard. Like, it's definitely the cadence of development is not the cadence of product definition and discovery. So it can be hard.
There's always stuff though that developers can do, right? Setting up those tools, you know, the automation. And I think, and we do a good job, but just reaching out, and I've had designers do it where they're like working on an early, you know, these are early drafts, and there's already that communication, that collaboration happening. And that's, again, coming back to like the cross-functional core is it makes it easy, it makes communication easier. It doesn't make it, you know, required. It doesn't force it to happen. But it makes it a lot more likely, more probable.
And it's really important to share parts of this process back even before we have a thing. So we do pretty lightweight user testing. So we'll do some user testing, like usability testing plus interview, and then you will gather what we've learned, or sometimes the whole team is invited to view, like live, what's happening. We make sure those learners are getting back to the team, so it's when we're problem solving, they have the same information to go on. So we want to make sure we're moving people in on what we're learning, and then also looping them in, you know, in certain increments, like, okay, like this is generally what we're thinking. Let's be a sounding board from a technical perspective before we actually get like fine-tuning of that.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think there's also that collaboration between the 3 sets of constraints, right? There's business constraints of that this is what you're trying to do. There are technical constraints of what we can physically do, right? If we have to, call into like, I've worked on a project with insurance, and they had called to big, slow insurance. Like, it's slow API. We don't have any choice about that API being slow. This is going to be slow. What do we do to mitigate that? And then the design constraints of like, users have to actually be able to do things on top of all that. And this kind of, the intersection of those three sets of constraints are what we're constantly
Polishing still.
building and understanding.
Yeah, and I maybe like kind of reinterpreting your question in like in my own way, but I think exploration and research can kind of go on like ad infinitum. But I think one of the values that we have with design here, you mentioned the other day, was Dave really preaches this, is just-in-time design. So it's like, this is really like helpful for me, where I can continue to do like over design this thing. But if we need to get this feature defined, the story defined, just explore it, but like time box it and sort of put a bow on it for now and get it out there, because we said software is never done. So just ship it and we'll learn from it, and maybe people come back and realize, oh, we did this feature over here and this feature, and they're like, they share similar things, so why don't we like standardize these components or something like that? And there'll be time for that, but we're prioritizing these most important things, those most important like MVP level features. Yeah, for that core path. Yeah, that's really good for me. And sometimes like developers are like, shit done, and so then it's like, oh, I gotta like, keep up. Sometimes, usually it's actually the opposite, but regardless. But I think it's nice just like have that check, like just get it done enough for this, because it's always, in a way, it's always MVP.
Yeah, like we need an agile principles on depth and perfectionism.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfectionism is the depth to success.
Exactly.
There we go.
Well, that still requires, I think, that business buy-in, right? The business buy-in that not only is this okay, but that the business needs to understand that we're incurring like some level of debt. We need to go back and revise this, and then there's that I guess the biggest problem there is that it's always there, right? That you're always creating that debt. You just don't always say it out loud. And again, going back, I guess, to communication and collaboration, having everyone in the room of like, okay, we're going to do this. We understand that this is not entirely perfect, because that's not going to happen. But that we understand what trade-offs we're making. I think that's an entire conversation of its own, of like talking about trade-offs between speed and quality, right? There's typically a trade-off there, unless you're Ferrari, it's just quality. And you end up with something that goes fast. But right, we have those trade-offs. I love talking with people about like which thing, like if you could pick one of these two things, right? A lot of those trade-offs are prioritization of like, you can't do it all. You can't say all of the above. It's not on the list. So which one, if you're forced to pick, which one are you forced to pick first? And then it's, right, because time is your primary thing that you can't do make more. You can hire more developers, you can hire more designers. You may not make it faster, but you can get more resources. The thing you can't get more is you can't get more time. Right? That's ticking, unless you go to your black hole. It slows you down, it doesn't speed you up.
Good point.
So, but everybody else is doing it. Yeah. But for all your clients, you're a black hole, you can get yourself more time.
Yeah.
But you can sell management, like you need management's buy-in to do this, but you can sell management on it because of the efficiency gains and the de-risking of the time you're spending, the dollars you're spending in time.
Yeah. And I think also just to be realistic about what we do at Carbon 5, like we are consultants who are brought in usually to solve like some pretty like hairy problems. And so a lot of times it's not like you're not at that like refinement phase of the project. That might be like their brand designers coming in, like working with product designers to like polish the, codify the profile, this and that. So a lot of times we have to think like, we just have to weigh those trade-offs, and maybe our portfolio suffers as a result because we solving these like really tough problems, but the end result is not always like this problem.
I'm gonna claim I said this because I don't know, I heard this from somewhere, but agile itself is an agile process. You're not done with process either. And this is something you say a lot, that the process is a continuous, we're always learning not just about the product, we're also learning about the team, we're learning about how we want things to work. And it's okay to not do it by whatever book is currently on the business bestseller list. I'm not sure it is today, but right, it changes, and our human understanding about how teams work and how business works, especially in software, where realistically software is a pretty young industry. Like compared to yoga or landscaping, we're pretty darn young. We're still figuring a lot of things out, but some businesses, figured out a long time ago. But we also have those new pieces of parts, new ability to change things that contractors building a business, building a building. There we go. Thank you. For those bees and stuff. When you're building a building, right, you don't have that much chance to change the foundation. We actually do, and that's something that's fairly, I think, new. And so we're still understanding as an industry and as business and MBA people who write these books, I guess. We're still figuring out what works. And so, not to mention, an actual cross-functional team is made up of actual individuals, as opposed to a book, which is made up of generalities, and individuals work differently.
Every team is different.
Maybe just a quick question, since we're out of time, but is there something that you don't like about this process?
I don't know. I'm kind of a convert. I feel like whenever, people are always a problem, right? Whatever, like always. You get part of your career, and it's always people. You figure out some of these other constraints and technical things. But like, I think that whenever things get choppy, I have been able to rely on a process like this to get us through the woods. I mean, it can be messy at times because people are messy. But the things that we do in this process get us to the right answers pretty much every time. I think the only thing we haven't talked about is like the need of like candid one-on-one conversations to if things aren't going well, like with all kinds of people.
I can think of one thing I've seen a danger is, right? We're creating a team that's super flexible and efficient, and you can end up in a case where whoever, if you have like one particular big driver, especially outside the team, that is like, you're flexible, so let's change it again and again and again, and you get into where you're just changing, you're not actually moving forward. There's not actually progress. And there's a whole other talk on like mental health.
Micro versus macro.
Yeah, there's
spinning in circles.
and even like getting stuck in local optimization points. So those are all possible, but it's also, again, if you've got that candid one-on-one conversations, you've got that communication going.
And George, really, because I've been in that situation, it's like paper churning. Like, this is what you told me is a business goal. This is what's going to make you money. We need to call bankruptcy on this thing we're turning on. Like, we need to move on. That happens.
I think the thing that I still grapple with is like sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna stick around and like see this through to something like really refined. Not saying it's not agile because I don't think that's totally usually sort of thing. But just sort of seeing it through to like a higher definition phase and like refining some of those interactions. Because again, like we're painting in such broad strokes because we have to prioritize the most important things, and often we're starting from scratch.
Sometimes we are. Those projects are longer, but I feel like I've been on projects that have been longer. I feel like we've got some good knowledge.
Yeah, but I think in general, like compared to being like on an internal team,
That's
it's like
a
a baby.
problem though, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing. It can be a little exhausting. Like, okay, new project, new client, new troubles.
Well, if you want to come up and talk to us afterwards, thank you everybody for coming. Feel free to come and talk to us about your troubles, and we will solve them all. Promise.
Yeah, thanks for that.